Hello, I'm Chris Slisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore concepts that allow us to broaden our view of the world. You'll hear interesting topics, meet fascinating guests, and discover who you really are. Using the time-tested practices of astrology, you'll learn how to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Astrology, art, and spiritual adventure on Turning of the Wheel TV with Chris Slisher. Hey, hello, welcome to Turning of the Wheel. Usually I talk about astrology and other esoteric arts, and today I'm going to take a little bit of a journey into a whole new field that I've not discussed on the air before, acupuncture. Acupuncture has always fascinated me. For years, I've always been interested in it, and I think it's a wonderful modality. Matter of fact, I go to acupuncturist once a week, and I do it as a preventative measure to sort of keep my health in check. My guest today is Jonathan Glass. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chris, for having me.
He is an acupuncturist at the Healing Essence Center in Concord. It's healingessencecenter.com is his website. And I'm going to be the guinea pig today. So we're going to do a little bit talking about the acupuncture, then Jonathan's going to give me a few pointers, no pun intended, and we'll see what it's all about, and we'll talk about it. So Jonathan, how did you get interested in acupuncture to begin with?
Well, I started out as a massage therapist. I
Okay.
got interested in holistic health. I got interested in meditation when I was in my teens. I found it made me a better soccer player.
Oh, good.
Better hockey player.
Yeah.
Reduced anxiety. So I recognized that reality, that world, had some meaning to it.
Yeah.
So then I got into massage therapy, and a couple times when I was living in California, I hurt my back pretty bad. We had a local acupuncturist down the street, so I went for a treatment, and it was just remarkable. And it really piqued my interest. I think because I was interested in yoga and meditation, I was interested in the energetic aspect.
Interesting.
So
yeah.
that's how I got into
And
it.
you had good results.
I had fantastic results.
And this was like a muscle pain or
Yeah, my back when I was younger would sometimes go into spasm.
spasm, and it could clamp up and it kind of almost swell.
Yeah, it would swell,
Yeah.
and I could be for sometimes days at a time
Right.
when it would be very painful. So I'd go in there and get a treatment, and it really decreased the time that I was in pain. It was
Interesting.
significant.
I mean, I know a lot of people would go to a chiropractor in a case like that if they had a
Right.
back problem, or this, but I think, and interesting that you go to the acupuncturist because it's a different modality. It's
It's
working
a totally different modality, yeah.
and working in a different way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what is the basic premise of acupuncture? I mean, it seems to me, and you wonder how they even came up with the idea, but it seems to me such an unconscionable idea of taking a needle and sticking it into a person.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me logically. That would be
on a logical level, yeah. So we have to have a different vision of the body, and that's part of what's difficult because we think of the bones and the muscles and the blood and the nerves, that kind of thing.
Organs, yeah.
But it's a fact that we have electricity that goes through the body. I mean, they call that chi or prana. It's vital life energy, but it has an intelligent, you could say, electrical flow of energy. And that electrical flow of energy feeds every nerve and cell and tissue of the entire body. So when that electrical flow, it's like a circuit.
like a grid.
Like a grid, exactly, that goes through the body. And somehow these guys discovered it, and I have my theories of how they did that. But when that grid gets deranged or disturbed or interrupted, inflammation, pain, all kinds of physical symptoms manifest. And the body will not heal itself as quickly if the grid is disturbed. So acupuncture is an incredible system of reconnecting the grid and getting that flow of, you could say, bioelectric energy flowing through different tissues and areas of the body.
And do you think there's a correlation? Yeah, probably is, that the needles are what stimulates that grid back to shape? I mean, when you put the needles in, that's what brings the, it sort of reawakens it?
Each point is you could say, is a conductive bioelectric area. So there's actually meters that you can put over the acupuncture points, and they'll start beeping.
Oh my gosh.
Because those points conduct electricity. So when you put those needles in, that needle is tapping into that electrical grid, sending a message to the brain, and doing something very specific.
So when you say that, that's interesting. So when the needle's in the part of the body that you find that you've determined to be important to check, when that needle goes in, that needle, that prick point sends an impulse to the brain that says this is an area that needs to be tuned up, and the brain then rushes to
But it may
aid.
not be the local area, though. That's what's really interesting, because, and this is what the genius of acupuncture is, all the different interconnections.
Okay.
So when you do something here, many, many things are happening. I mean, this is a heart channel right here.
Okay.
So you're impacting the heart. You're impacting different tissues of the body. You're impacting many, many hormonal and electrical aspects of the body.
So when you went in for back work, they didn't necessarily put needles in your back.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You can.
You can.
You can.
And would it work locally in that regard?
Yes, it would work locally. So a lot of times I will do what's called distal points for low back pain. Someone will be lying on their back, and there's a bunch of points in the hand and the ankles that you will treat for the low back. And I find that people get just as good results. Every once in a while, if the muscle is so tight and clamped up, I'll put some needles in there. And that can be beneficial too.
Wow.
But yeah.
So do you find that, I mean, you say that it works on muscles, it works on organs, it works on your individual subsystems within your body, like the endocrine system and the heart system.
Absolutely.
And
every system.
So every system works. And you can tell that. How do you know where to tell where the action is, unless the person comes and says, I've got a toothache or an earache or whatever?
Right. So, one of the basics ways is checking the pulses. And the pulses that you go to any doctor, for your checkup, they'll check your pulse. What they're feeling for is the count. How fast is your is your heart pumping? But in acupuncture, we're looking at the strength of the pulse, the speed of the pulse, the quality of the pulse. There's actually considered to be 28 qualities on the pulse.
And you can tell that by using fingertips.
The fingertips, yep. And so for instance, right here in the right hand, this is the lung, then we have the spleen, and then we have the kidney.
Wow.
And the left hand, we have the heart, we have the liver, and the other kidney.
Interesting.
Okay, so by feeling that, many cases the heart pulse will be very strong, and the kidney pulse will be very weak. They'll feel different. So the pulses reflect, you could say, the bioelectric circuitry of the body.
It's sort of like taking a snapshot of a meter or something that says, this is where we are at this point in time.
Exactly. So immediately you can feel the pulse and go, okay, there's an imbalance somewhere.
Right. And so you're not measuring just the heart like the doctor does. The doctor just usually texts you for your pulse, or you can text when you go running or whatever, you do that.
Right.
This is more about the other organs in there too. And they're divided up by that left and right like that.
Yes.
Huh.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So when a person comes in and has this, and then how do you verify that it's worked? I mean, you have a way of saying, will this come back next week, or how do you know?
Well, I mean, depending on what we're working on, one thing is I always personally will check the pulses in the beginning and the end.
Okay.
And
okay, so you get a little bit of a...
Yeah, I still remember the first time I did acupuncture, and I did what my teacher said, and I felt the pulse, and it changed. I almost fainted.
Wow.
Because
was that dramatic?
It did. Well, it just did what it was supposed to do. A weak pulse became a strong pulse.
And it literally is that, so it's like getting a signal, like
you literally feel a strength. If the pulse is weak, it's hard to feel, and then you do the treatment, and it's not hard to feel anymore.
Was that a difficult skill to learn and to sort of get your head around?
It takes time. It takes repetition. Yeah, just feeling it again and again.
And then, when you were learning this, did you have someone to bounce your ideas off? Say, this pulse feels weak, and the doctor.
In school we would. We'd feel the pulse, and then we'd write down what we thought it was. We'd go to the teacher, and he'd feel it, and he'd say yes, no, whatever. And we had to, as homework, we had to, have I don't know how many thousands of pulses
check people
to graduate
to see how they were. Yeah. I also know that when I go to see my acupuncturist, she also checks my tongue every time.
Yes. Yep.
And what's that for? Well,
the tongue is actually a map of the body. I mean, a lot of people know about these map systems. So, for instance, people have seen reflexology charts, which is a map of the body. There's many maps. The hands are a map of the body. The ears are a map of the body. Bottom of the feet. The tongue is also a map of the body. Now, we typically don't treat the tongue with acupuncture, but the tongue is a map of the body, and it also reflects the small intestine.
I see.
Meaning, so if there's a lot of coating on the tongue, if there's a white coating or a yellow coating, that means something. If there's a black coating, that means something. If there's lines on the tongue. So the tip of the tongue is the upper part of the body, and the back of the tongue is more the intestines and the kidneys.
Interesting.
So you can look at the tongue and have a sense of, where there's congestion, maybe where there's stress, things like that.
Huh. How do you think this evolved? I mean, you said you have a theory about how this evolved.
Well, sometimes people say, well, some guy was walking through the woods and he had a stomach ache and it hit stomach 38, the point, and he got better. I don't think it was, because these guys, in ancient China, ancient India, they were sages. They were introspective people. And they were dedicating their entire existence to understanding themselves. And they didn't have machines.
Right.
They didn't have, so all the intelligence that we put into technology, they used that very same intelligence and directed it inside themselves. and they saw and recognized things. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how would you discover an electric system that long ago? How would you come up with that idea?
Yeah, well, they didn't think of it as electric because they didn't know electricity was. We
right.
use that word, but they think of it as life
energy
and chi, and we can feel energy. There's no question that we can feel. We feel energy. We do feel it, and especially if you're meditating and doing Tai Chi and doing yoga on a regular basis, or sitting in the mountains in China by a river for hours at a time, just going within yourself. There's realizations that come from that. And I think that's how the medicines evolved. And there's so many systems, shamanic traditions are going within systems and they get information. And I think we forget in the West that there is that potential of getting accurate information by going within.
Right. And do you think that is it a viable practice within the medical community of the Western world, to say?
I think it's an extremely.
No, I'm
viable
sure you
practice.
think it, but I'm saying, do they recognize it as?
Oh, do they recognize more and more so? I mean, Children's Hospital has acupuncture. Emerson Hospital here has some acupuncture. I think it's an evolutionary thing. I mean, 10 years ago, I had doctors who would poo-poo it, and those very same doctors are now, well, if it works, great. And then some of them are like even learning how to do it. So. Yeah. So
what are some of the extreme things that you've seen repaired in your time as an acupuncturist?
I mean, I had a client once who came in and she had neck pain for 12 years.
Wow.
And I gave her one treatment and her neck pain was completely gone. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it was remarkable. I mean, she was in a lot of pain, 12 years, and then she had low back pain. It took me 6 treatments to help clear that, and that was a more recent injury.
Interesting.
I've had people that are extremely wiped out, like feeling like they're practically dead. Really walking around, dragging like anything. And with acupuncture, what's so beautiful about the pulse is you can tell if there's what's called a block, and by clearing an energy block, it's like a circuit that has not been turned back on.
Okay.
And they're walking around with 3 circuits blown.
Okay. Like a fuse that's been thrown.
A fuse that's blown, and they're stealing energy from other parts of themselves, or it's like taking an extension cord from the kitchen to light up the living room because the living room blew, rather than turning the fuse back on.
Right.
So they had like 3 or 4 fuses blown, and then fixing that, it can be incredible just to see someone wake up and their energy just.
And you do see that kind of response.
I see it. I see it quite often,
Interesting.
Yeah. Especially these days, people get really stressed and they get whacked out, from traveling and pushing and stress.
Overstimulation, just the social media alone.
And it's amazing how many blocks happen. And then by clearing that, people really feel better.
Do you think people recognize that they have these blocks, or do you have clients who come to you just on a regular basis?
That's a great question. Once they get cleared, then they start to, if they're a regular patient, then they start to recognize it, because, I mean, I have people come in sort of joking and they say, I hope I have a block, I feel really bad today. And sure enough, you get a block, and
they're good.
So you can feel it. You can feel it.
I've heard stories about acupuncture in China whereby the people will visit the acupuncturist and they don't pay, or they pay, and then if they get sick, the acupuncturist gives them the money back.
Well, yeah, the system.
I know you don't do that, but
the system. Yeah, I wish I could. The system was you would pay only when you were healthy.
Right.
So if you got sick, you didn't have to pay anything.
Interesting.
You just go and get as many treatments as you needed. Because it's a different model. It's a health model. It's like, I'm going to help prevent you from getting sick.
Right. And that's how I think is the real true value of acupuncture, is the preventative quality of it. You don't necessarily, we in Western civilization are very much of a reactive kind of society and mentality, where something breaks and we rush to fix it, as opposed to fixing it before it breaks.
Right.
And I think that's a different mentality between
different
Eastern and Western philosophies and lifestyles in general. I mean, it's much easier to be preventative and to be proactive, which is why I've been doing it for so long. I initially went for sort of a stress reduction and, like you say, blockage, and I always loved the idea of it. I said, this is so bizarre, it's got to work. And so I loved it, and I entered into it very naively, but I've educated myself over the years, and I've come to really like it, and if I don't have it, I miss it. I will say that. You sort of become kind of, I don't want to say addicted, but you become habitualized to it. It's like a ritual that you want to keep on with, and it's sort of a good health practice. Probably to overset all the things I do wrong with myself, but that's beside the point. But anyway, it's a good preventative measure, and I've always been fascinated by it. And so let's talk a little bit about the needles.
Sure.
You have different sizes for different things?
Yeah, there's different needles. I usually use 1-inch needles, which are very, very thin, practically as thin as hair.
Oh yeah.
Probably can't really see those,
Right.
but it's
No,
extremely
it's very thin.
thin.
Right.
And we insert them in different parts of the body based on what the treatment is. They don't. Different traditions, just like different types of martial arts, are more aggressive. Some are more subtle. Some styles of acupuncture. Some acupuncturists really want to get a strong sensation, and then we have certain styles of Japanese acupuncture which barely touch the body.
Oh yeah.
So there's a wide spectrum of styles.
And then there's acupressure too.
And acupressure, yeah.
Acupressure is simply just putting pressure on that spot
Right.
as well, which is not as effective, you think?
Well, it's effective, but the issue is what's really nice about the acupuncture needles, it's like having many hands.
Oh, I see.
So I can put a needle there, I can put it there, I can put it there, I can put it there. So with acupressure, I can only maybe
do one place,
two places at a time.
I've also seen recently the idea of introducing electric acupuncture. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with it. I used to get it a lot. I personally don't do it. I think it's a good thing, and I think it's fine for those who practice it. For me, I've not resonated with adding that type of electricity into the body.
It seems sort of inorganic, if that's the
Yeah,
word for it.
exactly.
It
I'm
seems
not in favor of it myself.
Yeah, it seems like you're introducing a man-made device. Well, I mean, needles are man-made too, but you're introducing a device with electricity in it to sort of stimulate the electricity. It's almost like jump-starting something.
Right, and electricity isn't really that coherent with the human energy electricity.
I see. It's not.
So
it's not.
It's not. It doesn't have a coherent kind of relationship. So
Okay.
I prefer not to do that.
All right. Well, listen, I want to have you try this out.
Sure.
I think you should do my pulses and
Okay.
tell me what you think. And
Okay,
then,
I'm going to check your pulses.
and then don't use the hammer when you put the needle in.
I'll try not to.
Okay, good.
I'll use the big rusty needles though. Okay,
I was going to say, in the old days, they probably had bigger needles.
Yeah, they had bigger, thicker needles. Yeah, generally. Now they make them pretty thin.
Yeah.
Well, you got good pulses and they're strong. So I think your energy in general is, without going into a whole thing, but
Right.
you have good, strong. You're pretty energized most of the time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, energetic guy.
I sleep well.
Yeah, no, your pulses are good. I don't see these days a lot of people with good, strong pulses.
Interesting.
So you're doing something
Interesting,
right.
good.
Okay. So why don't I just do? I'll do a point right here.
Okay.
This is called Lingu,
Okay.
and it's one of the most famous points of the body.
And what does that do?
Lingu, it's a large intestine point, but it sort of it helps with digestion. It helps with the flow of general energy throughout the body. My teacher said it, when in doubt, if you don't know what the heck to do with somebody,
Do that.
do Lingu. Kind of covers all the bases.
That's funny.
So then maybe we'll do a nice lung point here.
Okay.
Nice breath.
By the way, you can hardly even feel these needles going in. They are so thin, it's almost impossible to tell that they're going in. I've had needles in the past that I felt, but these I don't really feel. These are very, very thin.
Yeah, I use thin needles.
Yeah, and people, I've talked about my acupuncture practice with people, and
Just gonna do this one real quick.
they always say,
Okay.
I'm scared to death of needles. And I say, well, you really don't feel them, but people do have that problem, don't they?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And how do you address that?
Well, if they get in the door, if
They're
they
there.
come, and I do have some people who come in and say, I don't want needles today, but for the most part, if they're there, and honestly, if I go really slowly and you have
They
to
won't
pace
even know.
somebody, just say, this is what I'm going to do. I might even show them to myself, and then I don't yelp when I do it, and be as gentle as I possibly can the first couple of needles.
There really is a big myth about acupuncture, and this is
Yeah.
one of them, I think. And I was never a fan of needles as a kid, getting shots at the doctor and stuff like that. But
Right.
this is not at all like this. This is so gentle. I could not even tell he put this needle into me in my hand right here. I could not even feel it. So for that to be so innocuous and so, not even without any, and there's no blood being drawn, nothing like that. It's very, very simple. It's almost like you're just placing the needle there.
Yeah.
Like you're almost finding a cell in a hole in the body and a pore, and
Yep.
just putting it into the pore.
That's kind of what you're doing.
Yeah. So I've got a needle in here, and this one is bouncing away because that's my
It's right next
lungs.
to your
my heart.
your pulse. Yeah.
Okay. And this one's sitting there. I got one in what's this one here called?
This is yin tong, it's called. This is a beautiful point. Most people have heard, many people have heard of the third eye.
Third eye.
But there's a lot of bioelectric energy right here, a lot of strong energy there. So that really helps calm the mind,
Okay.
focus and calm the mind. I do that point a lot. There are some people that their minds are so active that they don't like that point.
The needle pops out.
Yeah, the needle pops out. 99% of people like that point. And then this point over here is a beautiful ear point called Shen Men. And Shen means spirit, Men means mind. So it calms the spirit of the mind.
Yeah.
So they're both really nice points.
You know, I'm fascinated by the way you describe this, and I've always, you know, I'm just amazed by it. But I think that what confuses me is how they map the spot of the point to the organ or to the system.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, whoever thought that up?
Yeah, I mean, again, inner vision. I can't. But you know, it's interesting. For instance, when someone has a heart attack, what happens? It's usually the pinky, right, the inner arm. That's exactly where the heart meridian goes, right through the pinky, right up the arm into here, then into the heart. So, you know, I don't know how they figured it out, but they sure did.
Well, you know, there's a lot of speculation that some of these ancient arts where people came preloaded with them, you know, some way that they came to the planet, they already had this knowledge there, and they sort of just was a matter of awakening it, or somehow they made the connection. It's interesting. It feels very, very good. I'm always, as I said, I'm a big fan of acupuncture. I've been using it for years. And I think it was probably the second time I went to see Jonathan years ago, I fell asleep almost every time I have acupuncture, I fall asleep. I went to Jonathan, and this is going to sound odd, but I actually felt myself levitating. And I was completely, I'm a skeptic about this a lot of times. I like to keep a skeptical mind. I like to push the envelope a little bit, make sure it's not hoo-ha.
Right.
And it was remarkable. It's never happened to me again, but that one time, I must have been ready for it.
I remember it, yeah. And you know, it does happen. It usually happens, I would say, the first few times of the treatment. Yeah. And then it doesn't happen as frequently after that. It can happen, but not as frequently. That's what I've noticed, yeah.
Wow.
For some reason.
Just amazing. And there's something else that you used to use on me, which is called moksha. Can you explain?
Moksha, yeah.
Moksha.
So moksha is an herb. It's artemisia. And artemisia is a common plant. It grows all over America. There's different types of artemisia, and there's a type of artemisia. So the Chinese have a saying, you warm the house before the guest arrives.
Yeah, that's good.
So the needle is the guest, and the house is the point, and so we're warming it with moksha. And so what we do is we'll take a little ball of the moksha, put on maybe a little oil or a little salve on the skin, put it there, and take an incense stick and light it. And when it gets warm, patient just says hot or warm. You take it off, and you do 3 or 4 or 5 of those, and it just really sort of tonifies and nourishes the point. And then when you do the needle, it has more impact.
So it sort of sets the stage for that.
Sets the stage, yeah. So it just enhances the potency of it.
Yeah, and you would use that at a time where you found a particular pulse that was very weak and needed the extra kick?
Yeah, a little nourishing. We generally, in this culture, we need nourishing. You know, generally in our Western culture.
Nourishing how?
Nourishing, we tend to be depleted in our culture. We're depleted,
Is that emotionally or physically?
Emotionally and physically.
Okay.
But even, you know, our teacher taught it in terms of levels, body, mind, and spirit. So we would describe it as on the spirit level. It doesn't mean spiritual, it doesn't mean you're not religious enough.
Right.
It means that many people's spirit has become a little bit covered over or depressed because life's challenges, you know, wax them down, kind of thing.
And are you seeing that more now?
So the moksha, I'm seeing it more and more all the time, yeah. People get burnt out, they get tired, they lose hope, they lose excitement and zest for life when life, you know, is challenging.
Right.
And with the amount of stresses and the wireless and the speed of life, people get burnt out.
Faster.
You know? Faster.
Yeah.
And so the moksha really is very nourishing. It's like a nourishing tonic. And it is said, this may sound a little bit unusual, but it's said vibrationally to the human energy field, it has the same frequency as a healthy human energy field.
Interesting.
So the herb itself is enhancing the natural, healthy bioelectric energy of the body itself.
Wow, that's very cool. So have you seen a distinct difference in your client base over the last 5 to 10 years with regard to what we're living through? Or has it been more of a spike that you've seen within the last 2 years?
Last couple of years, really. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety, I would say more anxiety and depression the last couple of years.
Yeah, and a lot of that's probably driven by the pace of a society, not necessarily by circumstance, but just by the sheer entry of smartphones and social media. Puts us in a very, very interesting moment in history, I think, where we're going to
agree.
see, I mean, I think the historians are going to look back 100 years and say, wow, these guys really went off the rails back then. Or not. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this. We were talking earlier about Facebook and how it can change your life and what it does for you. And there are benefits to it for sure, but there's also a lot of demands it places on you, and there's sort of this distractibility that comes into it.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue is, you know, are we as human beings really capable of, you know, avoiding the distraction of Facebook? And it's because of its nature. I don't just mean Facebook, but all the stuff.
The stuff.
It's extremely captivating,
Yeah.
and distracting, and you know, most people can't handle it.
It's been designed that way. I mean, they actually
been
brought
designed that way.
psychologists.
It's like junk food. Like the way the junk foods are created,
Right.
they're meant to be addictive. So the way, you know, this is being created is meant to be addictive and all-consuming.
I see.
And it has its benefits. And like money, you can you know, buy money and help people with it, or you can just become engrossed and obsessed with collecting it.
Right.
And, you know, become neurotic about it. So it's not it doesn't have to be an evil thing in and of itself, but it is a challenging thing, I would say.
Yeah, I think that we are, and this is a good remedy for it. When you typically look at someone, I've got, like you say, I've got good pulses. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. If I were to come to you, or someone were to come to you, you would do what you just did now with me. If someone came to your healingessencecenter.com is Jonathan's website, and he's located in downtown West Concord, right above Deborah's Natural Gourmet. And acupuncture is so you would take their pulses, and then you probably do a full array of needles, covering the whole body?
Yeah, I do different parts of the body. There's many different styles of acupuncture, and I use something called Taoist balance acupuncture. We'll put some needles in the lower legs, both arms, in a certain pattern. Probably the ears, probably a brow point. But then there's other times where we'll treat body points, whether upper chest or upper back, lower back, depending on the situation.
Huh. And then if you do find one organ that's weak, for example, you would then put extra emphasis on that.
Emphasize that organ.
Yeah, and that will last how long?
That really depends on how out of balance somebody is. So, you know, I think of a target. So if somebody is sort of hanging around the outer edges of the bullseye, or maybe one circle out, then that treatment's going to last longer. If somebody is really whacked out, really out of balance, they have lots of blocks, they've blown a lot of fuses, that person is going to need more work in the beginning.
I see.
And they may want a couple treatments a week for 3 to 6 weeks.
Interesting.
Or at least one treatment a week, 3 to 6 weeks. And then you can take it from there.
And then you say that it's being more widely recognized by health insurance as well as doctors?
Yeah, it's starting to.
Have you had doctors send someone to you for that purpose?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And it was what kind of a condition?
Usually injury.
Injury.
Usually injury, yeah.
So it's like a broken ankle or something?
Broken ankle, or some kind of
Pulled
chronic
muscle.
pain, or, you know, they can't help them with their neck pain, and
so many of us now are sitting in front of desks on screens with our heads down into our laps with the phones.
Right.
I'm sure you're getting a lot more neck pains.
Yeah, a lot of upper shoulder neck pain for sure.
A lot of stress.
Even thumbs. I've gotten some thumbs with people gaming.
Oh,
you know,
really?
Or arthritic
Or
feelings.
just texting, yeah.
Yeah, texting. Yeah.
Interesting. You know, when I typically do this, I'm not falling asleep now, obviously, and it's a good thing I'm not, but I typically find myself very, very relaxed.
Yeah.
I feel, this is going to sound odd, I almost feel high.
Yeah.
It's just sort of just a beautifully meditative, relaxing state that I come out of, and I really come out like I feel like I've had my clock cleaned or my slate cleaned, and it's just great. So.
Definitely. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, it's really a phenomenal thing. Ancient, you should not be afraid of it. I am not someone who likes pain, as many of you don't, and I'm not, you know, but I think that this I could not feel at all. These needles are very thin, and you could not find a gentler man to do it on you. Jonathan's always had a great touch with this. He's a perfect natural, and I think his knowledge is extensive. I've been to him many times, and I found that I've always come away very refreshed, kind of like a new slate, a new lease on life, so to speak. Jonathan's website is healingessencecenter.com. It's in West Acton. And
West Concord.
West Concord, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no
West
problem.
Concord, yeah. And so I typically would get more, when I go, I typically get more needles, but this is working. It's kind of like I think once you try it, you'll be sorry you haven't done it again. So, Jonathan, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.